She discovered an incredible secret while saving a dying frozen wolf. Prepare to be inspired. Emma Turner trudged through the snow-laden landscape of evergreen pines, her heart heavy with the burdens of expectation and the faltering legacy of her family's veterinary practice. The frigid winter air nipped at her cheeks, yet the chill couldn't match the anxiety building within her. A crushing pressure from the whispers that echoed through this town, demanding perfection in every facet of her life and work. Silently, she questioned her choices, her competence. Could she bear the weight of tradition while watching her family's reputation unravel like threadbare fabric? As she rounded a bend, a flash of movement caught her eye. Emma skidded to a halt. A wolf, proud and fierce, was helplessly trapped on a frozen lake, its wild eyes filled with distress. Instinctively, she felt the urge to rush forward, but her mind churned with doubt. Wolves were feared and reviled, symbols of danger, yet they embodied everything she longed for: freedom, vitality, raw beauty. Emma hesitated, her pulse quickening, battling between societal mandates and her instinct to save this creature. In that moment, she recognized her first moral dilemma: risk her reputation by saving an apparent menace, or remain passive, adhering to the very constraints holding her captive. Could she really step away from the expectations swirling through this community? She envisioned the judgmental stares from her peers, the pitying remarks from her neighbors. Would they rally behind her if she chose to fight for a wolf? The unresolved conflict crackled between her clenched fists as she took a precarious step forward. Grabbing a long branch, Emma ventured onto the thin ice, the surface creaking ominously beneath her weight. Each crunch echoed the disjointed rhythm of her racing mind, her passion for wildlife igniting against the backdrop of conventional thinking. The tension swirled like the gusting wind around her, creating an internal storm that threatened to capsize her resolve. Just as she reached the wolf, its sharp gaze met hers, a moment fraught with shared desperation. She could sense the confrontation that lay within her. Did she have the strength to unshackle herself from her family's echoes? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With trembling hands and heart racing, Emma knelt next to the wolf, carefully assessing its wounds and the icy grip of the lake beneath. She fought through waves of uncertainty, knowing each life she touched mirrored her own struggles. For every moment she spent caring for the wolf, a flicker of a forgotten love for wildlife broke through her despair. Perhaps, saving this creature would grant her the courage to reclaim the fading edge of her family's legacy. As the creature drew closer, she felt a strange kinship, one that rooted her to a deeper truth about her history. Her ancestors were whispered to have hunted in these woods long before the elite's dominion suffocated her family's claim. With a growing awareness of the land's untold stories, dread crept up her spine. The town's leaders had plans. They sought to swallow the wilderness that might hold her family's history, just as the very weight of expectation sought to suffocate her spirit. As Emma worked with fierce determination, the stakes of her internal and external battles loomed larger, intertwining within a web of tradition and the roaring spirit of freedom. Standing between two worlds, Emma had to ask herself if she could face down the very force suffocating her, or would the tide of community opinion sweep her under, drowning her in a sea of silence. Everything teetered on the brink, a simmering storm poised to break, and Emma's journey had only just begun. With resolved determination, Emma focused on the wolf's condition, her fingers deftly probing its fur for injuries. The creature winced, sensing her touch, and Emma felt a pang of guilt infiltrate her resolve. Every throb of its pulse resonated within her, urging her to confront her own fears. She closed her eyes, and for a moment the clamoring voice of expectation faded into the background. It was as if the wolf had drawn her into a different reality, one where obligation didn't dictate her existence. Glimmers of early morning light reflected off the ice, illuminating the path ahead. Sustaining this creature could become her reclamation, A battle not just for the wolf's life, but for her own. She would not be defined by the town's whispers. Instead, she was ready to forge a new narrative that embraced her passion for life beyond mere survival. With a renewed sense of purpose, Emma gently cradled the wolf's head. "Stay with me," she murmured, her voice steady despite the tremors in her heart. There was magic in this moment. The act of compassion pierced through her fog of self-doubt. This was not only a life she was fighting for, but the path to her own liberation. As she worked, an idea began to take root in her mind. What if this wolf's rescue could serve as a catalyst for change in Evergreen Pines? As she fashioned a makeshift splint from the branch, possibilities unfurled, community outreach and education, fostering understanding rather than fear of wildlife. She envisioned herself consulting with local leaders, presenting data and testimonies to protect the creature's habitat. There was power in this vision, a calling that resonated deeply within her. Ambivalence still tugged at Emma's mind. How realistic was her ambition? Could she gain enough support in a town steeped in tradition? Yet every challenge she faced felt manageable when she fought alongside this wolf. Empowerment coursed through her veins, transforming the uncertainty into a fierce resolve to make a meaningful impact. Just then, a cracking sound broke her concentration. She whipped her head up, her heart galloping in her chest. Curiosity clashed with dread as she glimpsed shadows against the trees, figures coming towards her, and instinct suggested they weren't friendly. Her heart sank. This moment was more than a struggle against the frozen elements. She recognized the figures from town, members of her family's longtime peers, the very people whose opinions bore inescapable weight on her life. Suppressing an immediate rush of anxiety, Emma's thoughts raced. Would they see her act of kindness as heroic or reckless? Could she defend her choice when faced with the potential condemnation of those who held her family's reputation in their hands? As she stood, torn between standing her ground and retreating, she felt the wolf struggle to rise alongside her, as if aware of the imminent approach. The unexpected warmth of its body beside her rekindled her courage. Perhaps this creature would not only be saved, but it could symbolize her fight for authenticity against the outdated traditions of her family and community. The figures closed the distance, scattering the remnants of her sanctuary. Emma steadied her breath, willing herself to stand tall. This was a new chapter unfolding, her realization of strength and purpose clashing against the potential judgment. Would she embrace the coming confrontation, grounding her identity in action, or flee into the shadows of expectation? A decision loomed like an approaching storm, and Emma knew the consequences swept across more than just the frozen lake. They echoed within her very soul. And as she steadied herself for the confrontation, she felt a singular truth galvanizing her resolve. Her identity was not merely inherited, it was something she could carve out anew. With the wolf's fierce spirit beside her, she whispered a silent promise. She would not back down. The moment had arrived, and as she stood defiantly, heart pounding, she readied herself to face the voices that had haunted her, fully aware that this could transform everything. Would she find the courage to reshape her story amidst the judgment? The answer was just at the cusp of revelation, swirling with chaotic potential. The figures emerged from the trees like specters from her past, each face carrying a history of judgment and expectation. Emma recognized them, her father's old friends, their expressions a cocktail of concern and skepticism. The wolf shifted beside her, a living heartbeat that reminded her this was a moment of profound significance, not just for itself, but for her. With a quick inhale, Emma took a step forward, silently commanding her brain to dismiss the looming dread that threatened to suffocate her. They were not strangers. They were old acquaintances, whose voices she had implored to drown her own since childhood. Lifting her chin, she focused on their intent, rather than her fears. "Emma," one of them called, an edge of disbelief in his tone. "What are you doing out here? This isn't safe." "It's not about safety," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "It's about compassion." The word felt foreign, yet liberating on her tongue, like a spell that could grant her strength. The group shared uncertain glances. Their collective tumult was palpable, their judgments swirling in the air like the mist over the frozen lake. Emma could feel them weighing her, measuring her worth against their expectations. "What do you think you're doing with that wolf?" asked another, a frown creasing his brow. "We all know what happens when wolves get too close to town. You can't just what?" Emma challenged, bolstered by a surge of adrenaline. The flicker of fear within her transformed into defiance. "Leave it to die? Assume that it's nothing but a threat? You're letting fear dictate your actions." The words hung heavy between them, reverberating in the cold air. A hushed silence enveloped the clearing, only shattered by the low whine of the wolf resting near her. Emma sensed the grip of tradition tightening around their minds, testimony to the history that had dominated Evergreen Pines for years, suffocating any sense of progress. One man shook his head, a paternal glimmer of concern evident in his eyes. "You know this is dangerous. If the townsfolk see you with it, they'll see someone who dared to challenge the status quo," she countered, summoning the conviction she'd nurtured in her heart for so long. "We can't continue to live in ignorance. I want to change this narrative." In that moment, Emma felt a shift within the dynamic. The wolf's breathing steadied, matching hers in rhythm, as if urging her forward. The urgency of her plea pulsed in her veins, inspiring her to dig deeper into her convictions. "I've realized," she began, her tone softening, "that our fear of wildlife can be transformed into understanding. We can coexist. If we don't take this wolf's suffering to heart, we'll miss the chance to learn something vital about ourselves." There was a flicker of hesitation among them. Emma took a moment to observe their shift, the gradual crumbling of their prior judgments. Seeds of curiosity began to sprout in their eyes, indicating they were grappling with her unconventional notions. What if it's not just about the wolf? What if this is a call for our community to understand the importance of the ecosystem we inhabit? Emma pressed. What if my stand could be a precursor to something larger, an opportunity for dialogue, for healing? A stillness spread among them, the air thick with unarticulated reflections. Each of them was wrestling between the comfort of tradition and the unsettling prospect of change. It was palpable, and Emma couldn't help but feel that for the first time, they were engaging with her not as a daughter but as an equal. Just then, one of the men stepped closer, narrowing his eyes as he gestured toward the wolf and then back at Emma. "If we were to support you, would you be willing to lead? To ensure this wolf is not just a whim, but a genuine project for awareness?" Emma hesitated, realization dawning upon her. The burden had shifted. It was no longer merely about the wolf, but a chance to redefine an entire community's relationship with nature. Responsibility loomed ahead like an uncharted trail. "Are you sure?" she asked, cautious yet hopeful. "Because this journey will challenge everything you think you know." His subtle nod ignited an electric surge of determination within her. With the wolf at her side, this was a pivotal intersection of her life, one that could redefine her mission not just for herself, but potentially for Evergreen Pines. As she turned to face the others, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursed through her. Emma stood at the precipice of a new path, but deeper questions surfaced. How to channel this momentum into tangible change? Would her newfound allies support the risks of this transformation? And just as uncertainty threatened to creep into her resolve again, she clasped her hands together, grounding herself. She needed to forge her vision into reality. She had the wolf, and she had a chance, yet the weight of that potential hung significantly, even ominously, over her ambitions. Emma was aware more than ever that the upcoming decisions would not only require strategic planning, but also an inner bravery she had scarcely known existed within her. Knowing that confronting her fears and leading the charge could culminate in either tremendous success or failure only intensified the stakes. With the sun beginning to rise over the horizon, illuminating the frost on the ground, she held on to her promise anew. This was only the beginning. But as the deliberations continued, tension simmered in the air, and Emma could feel that the greatest challenge was yet to come. There were murmurs of dissent echoing through the town, and faint whispers of skepticism looming in the background. What awaited her at home could be far more daunting than she had anticipated. Would she find allies amidst the impending storm? Or would she stand alone against the tide of tradition? Emma's heart raced as she considered the potential fallout. The time for action was fast approaching, and the path remained shrouded in uncertainty. With the sun rising higher, casting long shadows through the trees, Emma could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The group around her stood at a crossroads, much like she was. Their initial skepticism was fading, yet she sensed it was merely replaced by cautious intrigue. It was time to channel this energy into something purposeful. "Let's take action," Emma proposed, her voice firm. "Let's bring this conversation to the community. They need to hear our message, see for themselves that this wolf—" She gestured to her companion, who looked up at her with an expression that seemed almost understanding. "This wolf represents more than just fear. It embodies the need for awareness and change." A few of the men exchanged looks. They were beginning to stir, caught between the allure of her vision and the long-standing traditions they had upheld. She noted a new determination in their stares. An inkling of change sparked within them, yet doubt crept into Emma's mind. Could she truly turn their curiosity into commitment? There were decades of ingrained beliefs in play, and this was just the beginning of what would be a long and arduous journey. Emma took a moment, allowing the silence to linger as she collected her thoughts. Looking directly at the one who had lowered to her level, she challenged them to consider the implications of remaining stagnant. "This isn't just about me or even the wolf. It's about our children, our future. If we fail to address our relationship with nature now, what landscape will we leave for those who come after?" A flicker of something swept through the group. It was there in the furrowed brows and tight jaws, a hint of recognition, a yearning to be part of something meaningful instead of merely continuing the cycle of fear-based decisions. "Let's do a community meeting," she insisted. "We can share what we know, listen to one another, and create a space for ideas to flourish. I'll organize it. We'll show everyone that we can understand, adapt, and coexist. Let's educate, instead of ostracizing what we don't understand." A few hesitated before nodding, but one man spoke up, his brow furrowed. "You can't expect everyone to support this, Emma. There will be backlash. People will resist. It's not easy to change a narrative that's been ingrained for so long. What if they reject you?" The question hung between them, a dark cloud of doubt, but within that tension also lay her answer, a swiftly igniting fire in her heart. "Then I'll accept their rejection," she replied, resolute. "But I refuse to stay silent, to let fear dictate our narrative any longer. I'd rather stand for something that matters, even if it means facing opposition." A moment of clarity washed over her. Emma realized that the opposition she feared was not just external, it also dwelled within. She had always worried about disappointing others, of being seen as foolish for attempting to defy traditional expectations. But standing here, she understood that the conversation itself was vital. This is what she had searched for, her opportunity to transcend her upbringing. She felt the wolf shift restlessly at her side, a reminder that she was not alone in this. They needed each other, just as she needed to rally the community. "Change is a process," Emma continued, emboldened. "Transformation won't happen overnight, but if we begin today, we'll at least start a discussion. If even one person hears our message and decides to reconsider their beliefs, then we'll have succeeded. I can't promise an easy path, but I can promise it will be worthwhile." There was an awakening among them, rippling through the faces that had once regarded her with skepticism. She could almost see the debate spiraling in their minds, the choice to cling to the past or to embrace the uncertain future. The commitment to the project had shifted from a mere idea into something tangible, yet the stakes had risen significantly. But Emma understood that acceptance would not guarantee smooth sailing. As the meeting began to take shape in her mind, she felt another wave of uncertainty flood her thoughts. Would she truly be able to galvanize the townsfolk? To rally them against decades of tradition? As they began to discuss logistics, Emma felt the rush of adrenaline coursing through her. She was leading them, her voice was resonating, yet in the back of her mind lingered the fear of failure. The reality of backlash loomed larger than she wanted to admit, and the challenge ahead was steep. As the gathering drew to a close, her heart raced with possibilities mingled with apprehension. The real test wouldn't just be about planning a meeting. It would be about confronting the helplessness that had stifled her voice for years, rising above her doubts to face an entire community hesitant to change. But she was ready. She had the wolf beside her, an emblem of collaboration and compassion. Emma took a deep breath, committing to navigate the storm. As she turned away from the clearing and headed back home under the rising sun, Emma knew she was on the cusp of an unknown adventure, a confrontation that, as daunting as it seemed, was finally hers to face head-on. But as she neared the edge of the trees, another thought pricked her consciousness. What if the very allies she was counting on demonstrated hesitation, sowing seeds of discord instead of unity? Would her self-doubt threaten to unravel everything she had worked to build? Or could she find an unexpected ally in someone she never expected? Emma felt the edge of uncertainty sharpen as she approached home, the quiet of evergreen pines enveloping her. The hardest battles lay ahead, and she could only brace for what awaited. The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning and introspection. Emma found herself awake late into the night, her mind racing with the possibilities of the upcoming meeting. Each idea she had for the presentation morphed into an opportunity to not only educate others, but to solidify her voice, a voice she had long kept subdued by the fears of her upbringing. As she walked through evergreen pines, she began to sense her surroundings differently. The vibrant colors of the wildflowers blooming along the roadside no longer seemed like mere scenery. They represented resilience, beauty, and untamed life. Each breath she took felt sharper, more purposeful. Emma was stepping out of the shadows, clutching tightly to her resolve. Yet a gnawing worry tugged at her gut. Could she truly inspire change, or was her quest destined to fizzle against the might of tradition? The following morning, she met with some of the group members at the local cafe. It served as a neutral ground where coffee brewed and conversations flowed freely. Emma had taken it upon herself to prepare a presentation, knowing she could use visuals to drive her points home. She wanted to showcase not just the wolf, but the interconnectedness between humans and nature, illustrating the potential harm of ignorance. Her hands trembled as she stitched together her slides, drawing on data, photographs, and personal anecdotes from her time in the woods. The gathering that sat across from her wore varied expressions: curiosity, skepticism, and even mock disbelief. Emma couldn't help but notice the subtle differences in their body language. Some leaned in, eager to absorb information, while others remained rigid, arms crossed protectively over their chests. "Look," she began, maintaining eye contact with each of them. "I understand change is hard. The fear of the unknown can be paralyzing. But what if we let that fear control our decisions? We'll be stuck, forever circling the same issues without solutions." The room was thick with tension. A man named Jack, known for his staunch traditionalism, broke the silence. "And what makes you think you can convince anyone to listen? You're just one person." Her heart raced, but she was ready for this. Because it starts with one person believing change is possible. It starts with one person expressing vulnerability in front of their community. The tension shifted slightly and she pressed on, emboldened by the very uneasiness that had once immobilized her. "I've spent too long being afraid of rejection. Today, I stand here not as an authority, but as someone who cares deeply about our shared environment." As the discussion unfolded, the potential for alliances began to emerge. Emma realized she wasn't just facing opposition. She was stumbling upon those who, while hesitant, shared her frustrations. This internal revolution felt intoxicating. With each challenging question, her confidence blossomed instead of wilting. She began to tap into a deeper well of knowledge than she thought possible. It wasn't long before the conversation shifted from skepticism to curiosity, and Emma saw a spark ignite in their eyes. They were starting to engage with her ideas, rather than just push against them. Perhaps she did have allies among them after all, but then she encountered an unexpected dilemma. One of her supporters, Sarah, raised a valid concern about the repercussions of speaking out too boldly in a tight-knit community. "What if we expose ourselves and people lash out? We can't control the narrative once it's out there." Emma felt the weight of Sarah's words. The fear of backlash that had stricken her just days prior began to rear its head again. Doubts crawled back into her mind like unwelcome shadows. How could she protect those who rallied behind her? Taking a deep breath, she replied, We may face opposition, and that's a risk. But staying silent is a greater threat. I believe we can handle the aftermath, and if we stand together, we'll amplify our voices. They wrapped up the meeting, a mixture of hope and apprehension swirling in the air. Emma felt her heart race. She had taken significant steps, yet she knew the hardest battles lay ahead. The facade of solidarity danced tantalizingly close, but in the back of her mind lingered the suspicion that some within her circle still only shared in her enthusiasm to a point. As she left, she glanced up at the sky, hoping for clarity. The clouds loomed ominously, hinting at approaching storms. Would the support she'd gathered hold strong against the collective weight of tradition? That night, tension wrapped around her like a shroud as she prepared for the next meeting, a more public affair. Emma hesitated, thoughts spiraling into the fear of rejection. But clawing through that fear was a new awareness of her own capabilities. The time had come not just to face her community, but to push through her own fears once and for all. What she would discover in that confrontation could either solidify her newfound resolve, or shatter it under the overwhelming weight of resistance. The night before the public meeting grew heavy around Emma, the air thick with her swirling thoughts as if each whispered doubt had materialized into a physical presence. She paced her small living room, flipping through the presentation slides one last time, her heart thundering in sync with the ticking clock. She could feel every second counting down to the moment that could either launch her intentions into the open or dismantle the fragile confidence she had painstakingly built. Before she went to bed, she glanced out the window at the sprawling expanse of the forest beyond the town, towering trees silhouetted against the dimming twilight. The woods had always been her sanctuary, a place where she found solace, and now they felt like an echo of her own journey, a blend of uncharted territory and familiar ground. Just like the wolves she was presenting about, Emma fought against the instinct to retreat. She had to remind herself that transformation always came at the cost of confronting fear. When she arrived at the community hall the following day, the atmosphere was charged and restless. Locals milled about, exchanging murmurs that echoed her own trepidation. The room, filled with familiar faces, felt like a labyrinth of judgment. Boisterous laughter washed over her like an unexpected wave, and she clutched her notes to her chest, addressing the need for a mental steadying breath. As Emma stepped onto the small platform designed for speakers, she surveyed the crowd. Their familiar expressions, once warm and inviting, now felt burdened with skepticism and resistance. She was not merely battling the crowd's doubt, but wrestling with her own insecurities. The charisma that buoyed her in private instantly dimmed in the face of so many eyes trained on her. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice shaky but rising with determination. "Thank you for being here today to discuss a topic that matters deeply to me, and I believe to all of us." With her heart hammering in her chest, she drew on the strength she cultivated over the last few weeks, bolstered by her preparations but marked with a hint of vulnerability. Waves of divergence flowed throughout the audience as she presented her slides, images of wolves in their natural habitat, stark statistics about their dwindling numbers, and stories of their significance to the ecosystem. Slowly but surely, Emma felt the crowd shift. Faces that had been obstructed by doubt began to soften, and the intensity of their skepticism dulled. Her words resonated, and she could see subtle nods of agreement blooming. But one voice, Jack's, cut through the burgeoning connection sharper than before. "You can't emotionally manipulate us with pretty pictures. What's your point? You expect us to alter our lives for wolves?" Feeling a wave of resentment surface, Emma hesitated. To respond without losing her footing felt like a tightrope act, teetering perilously between confidence and collapse. The old insecurities crept closer, like shadows straining to swallow her whole. "No," she asserted, fighting through the claustrophobic feeling that encompassed her. "All I'm asking for is acknowledgement of our intertwined fates. Denying the value of nature impacts us all." This was her moment, a glimmer of awakening, one that shone light on the depths of her conviction. She opened up about her late-night walks in the woods, the sense of unity with nature, and the helplessness she felt watching that unity disappear. "We are all connected through this space. Letting that connection fray is akin to severing threads of ourselves." As her presentation continued, Emma found her footing, spurred by a sense of urgency. She began to share stories of the positive impacts of embracing that connection, the opportunities for regeneration. People leaned in closer, some clasping hands together in contemplation, and Emma could feel the stirrings of possibility in the air. If they could recall the significance of their surroundings, perhaps they could advocate for change together. But just as she sensed a glimmer of hope, Sarah shot up again, her voice trembling. "But we could be risking too much. What if the backlash is worse than the silence?" With her heart pounding anew, Emma realized that fear was the true adversary here. It had shackled them for too long. "That's a risk, yes," she replied, the fervor in her voice unwavering. "But facing those risks is the only way forward. We must uncover and embrace our truths, together. I believe we can create a narrative that doesn't allow fear to dictate our actions any longer." The murmurings intensified, a mix of apprehension and intrigue swirling among the audience. Emma could feel the weight of their collective history and expectations draping over her like a tapestry of resistance. Yet, through the billowing clouds of doubt, a sliver of insight emerged. They were as afraid of her message as she once was to express it, but there was a shimmer of realization that perhaps this was the fissure needed to let light in. As her time drew to a close, Emma leaned forward, vulnerability flashing in her eyes. "This isn't just about wolves or nature. It's about the legacy we choose to leave. Will we allow ourselves to evolve, or will we bind ourselves to fear?" The silence that followed was heavy with reflection, the crowd suspended between doubt and possibility. And at that moment, as Emma stepped down from the platform, adrenaline racing through her veins, she understood. The battles ahead would not be easy, but confrontation was inevitable. She had ignited a vital discussion, and as the murmurs of conversation buzzed to life, an ember of hope flickered in the depths of her newfound resolve. But lurking in the shadows of her mind was the realization. Taking this stand brought risks that extended beyond mere words. It was just the beginning, and she knew that conflict awaited her at every turn. Unbeknownst to her, the upcoming days would challenge her resolve and thrust her into a reality filled with unexpected alliances and formidable opposition. As she left the hall, determination coursing through her, she was forced to confront a daunting question. How far was she willing to go to protect what she believed in? The answer awaited just beyond the horizon, wrapped in a growing storm of uncertainty. The next morning, Emma woke to the pale light filtering through her bedroom window, illuminating the remnants of her restless night. The adrenaline from the previous day's meeting melted away into an unsettling quandary, a conflict of will and consequence. She lay there pondering her resolve. The words that had ignited discussion were also the beginning of potential backlash. In the stillness, she recalled Jack's challenge and Sarah's fears. Were they valid concerns, or just collected doubts that could anchor her to inaction? Diving deeper into her thoughts, she acknowledged her vulnerability, but knew dwelling in fear wouldn't evoke change. A realization emerged like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. To thrive, she needed not just to confront her fears, but to embrace them as part of a transformative journey. Fueled by her reflections, Emma's day began with renewed vigor. She donned a jacket and stepped into the crisp, early morning air, navigating towards the forest that had always been her refuge. It beckoned her, promising solace while she sought clarity amid chaos. As she walked, she inhaled deeply, letting the pine scent fill her lungs. The forest was alive, serving as both a reminder and a motivator. Suddenly the sound of rustling leaves broke her reverie, drawing her attention. She sidled through the underbrush, curiosity guiding her. Just ahead, she spotted a gray figure with a mottled coat lying against the base of a tree, struggling in apparent distress. The sight struck her, something instinctual igniting within her. This was no ordinary moment. It was a calling. As she approached cautiously, her heart raced. It was a wolf, emaciated and weak, its breath shallow and ragged. Emma felt an unfamiliar surge of determination as she crouched beside the creature. Reality settled in like a weight upon her chest. The forest had sent her a clear message. It wasn't just about the wolves she had spoken of, or the statistics she shared. It was about engaging with the living embodiment of what had inspired her advocacy. The urgency of the situation propelled her forward. This was not merely an animal in distress. This was a symbol of the struggle she faced within her community and herself. She couldn't just stand by. With careful movements, she reached out and placed her hand gently on the wolf's flank, seeking a connection. There was something profound in that touch, a silent understanding passing between them. As the wolf instinctively leaned into her touch, a wave of emotion washed over Emma. She felt a shared vulnerability, an acknowledgement of fate. With renewed focus, she sprang into action. Emma recalled her phone. She needed help. After a few frantic calls to local wildlife rehabilitation volunteers and gaining their guidance about what to do, she gently moved the wolf towards an area clearer of underbrush. The clock ticked down as she waited, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and anxiety. That moment wasn't just about saving a wolf. It was about reclaiming her path in advocacy and standing firm against the incoming doubts that clouded her resolve. When the volunteers arrived, she found herself in a whirlwind of calculations under their expert direction. How to stabilize the wolf, administering care, and securing transportation. For the first time since her meeting, she felt a sense of active involvement instead of passive advocacy. Standing shoulder to shoulder with these people united in purpose brought her clarity. She was no longer merely presenting ideas, but engaging with them directly. As the wolf was carefully lifted and transported, Emma felt a flicker igniting her spirit anew. Maybe this experience was a roadmap, revealing not just the interconnections she had spoken of, but the very threads that wove her own path forward. She was learning that true advocacy often meant stepping beyond fear and stepping into action, even when the stakes felt astronomical. Returning to her vehicle, she reflected on the shift within her. A commitment had formed, one that extended beyond words. The strong connection she felt was not just with the wolf, but also with her community's potential. The narrative she had started to weave needed to be actionable, tangible. Before driving away, she took one last look at the fading figures and heard one of the volunteers discuss the wolf's chances for recovery. Her heart swelled with both hope and determination. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it armed with the conviction of interconnectedness, ready to execute decisions that mattered. As twilight fell softly upon the trees, Emma drove home with a transformative realization gripping her. A question lingered just above the surface, taunting her psyche. How far could she push her passion before it became unmanageable, and would the path she chose risk more than she bargained for? In her anticipation and anxiety, she sensed the horizon was changing. It set the stage for confrontation with both allies and adversaries looming ahead, presenting an ultimatum. Was she ready to risk everything to protect what she believed in? The answer awaited like an echo in the distance, compelling her forward. Emma awoke the next morning with the dawn light spilling through her window, invigorating her spirit with the promise of a new day. She felt different, more aware of her purpose. The echoes of yesterday's decisive moments lingered in her mind. Knowing she had acted on instinct, that she had saved a life, was a powerful reminder of the impact one individual could create. As she pulled on her jeans and a comfortable shirt, she kept replaying the wolf's rescue in her thoughts, each detail igniting a passion she hadn't fully recognized before. She grabbed her laptop, eager to channel her energy into research and planning. The towering stacks of reports and documents she had avoided now felt like treasure troves of potential, holding the keys to further her advocacy. In her small home office, Emma drafted a presentation for the forthcoming community meeting. This time, it wouldn't be just statistics and facts. She would include the visceral story of the wolf. Knowing firsthand the interconnectedness of their fates made the statistics feel inadequate. Each graph could visually represent a point, but they lacked the emotional weight that a personal story could deliver. She began to write, her fingers flying over the keyboard, weaving a narrative that would draw people in and inspire them to take action. 2 hours passed, and she found herself deeply entrenched in her work, losing track of time. The more she wrote, the more clarity she gained. This was not merely advocacy. It was a call to arms, a plea for awakening. Yet, self-doubt crept back in, casting shadows over her vision. Would people understand the urgency? Would they connect with her experience? Would they act, or were they too absorbed in their day-to-day lives? She pushed the doubts aside and pressed on, focusing on crafting a compelling message. Later in the afternoon, fueled by her burgeoning confidence, she decided to drop by the local library. The building hummed with quiet energy. It was a space filled with possibilities. She steered herself to the section on wildlife conservation, her passion igniting as she sifted through titles. It was during her search that she stumbled upon a book discussing the historical significance of wolves in their ecosystem, revealing intricate relationships between predator and prey, and the delicate balance that had once thrived before their populations dwindled. This knowledge felt like armor against the wave of discontent she faced from those skeptical about her work. She discovered names and organizations engaged in reclamation initiatives, grassroots movements dedicated to restoring what had been lost. With each word, she felt empowered. Her efforts could be part of a larger tapestry of change. No longer did she feel alone. She became connected to a lineage of advocates who had fought to protect the natural world and re-establish balance in their communities. As she prepared to leave, the librarian approached her, noticing the stack of books in Emma's arms. They struck up a conversation about local wildlife and conservation efforts, and Emma found herself sharing her recent experience with the wolf. The librarian listened intently, her eyes alight with enthusiasm, and offered to help Emma spread the word about the upcoming meeting, suggesting resources and connections that could enhance her reach. With gratitude swelling in her chest, Emma returned home, invigorated by the librarian's support and insight. She realized that advocacy was not just about her personal journey. It was about fostering an environment where others felt empowered to share their stories and take action. This revelation solidified her commitment. She would create the meeting with an atmosphere of collaboration, inviting as many voices into the narrative as possible. As she sat down to rest, tired yet exhilarated, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Sarah, expressing concern about Emma's recent activities, wanting to know how she was handling the pressure. A part of Emma felt the familiar twinge of anxiety at the thought of explaining her vision to someone who hadn't yet seen the transformation in her. Would Sarah understand the shift? Would she support Emma's burgeoning resolve, or try to hold her back? The potential conflict loomed heavy, as the line between ambition and responsibility began to blur. Determined to confront this upcoming obstacle head-on, Emma felt an urgency pulse through her once more. Could she balance passion and prudence, or would this new venture risk everything she had worked so hard to establish? The duality of her emotions hung heavily in the air as she poised herself for their next conversation, aware that this was only the beginning of a much larger confrontation waiting to be explored. Emma paced the length of her living room, her heart racing with the anticipation of her upcoming conversation with Sarah. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her, mingling with the electric enthusiasm that surged through her from her recent discoveries. Each rehearsal of her words felt inadequate, a flimsy shield against the complexities of her evolving identity. She had known Sarah for years, their friendship a steadfast anchor. But now Emma found herself grappling with the fear that her transformation might create rifts between them. As her brain churned with strategies for their talk, Emma's thoughts shifted toward the meeting she was crafting. It wasn't merely a presentation. It was her declaration to the world that conservation mattered. She envisioned the faces of her neighbors, young and old, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue as she wove the powerful threads of her narrative. Every story she shared, every statistic she presented about the ecological significance of wolves, would be grounded in her experiences. She fought to keep the panic from paralyzing her. Determined not to let indecision win, Emma settled back at her desk to refine her presentation, feeling a flicker of inspiration spark within her. She poured her revelations onto the screen, consciously embedding her dramatic encounter with the wolf deep within the narrative. The pulse of that moment, the fierce will to save a life, would resonate profoundly with her audience, she hoped. But as she typed, the trepidation of possible backlash gnawed at her thoughts. She took a deep breath, attempting to anchor herself. The librarian's encouragement swirled in her mind, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this journey. There were others who had walked this path, advocating for what they loved fiercely despite the risk of misjudgment. This was a community of passion and perseverance that she was now a part of. With renewed vigor, Emma stood, stretched, and prepared to step into the world outside her comfort zone. She would text Sarah, initiate their conversation, and hopefully share enough of her journey so that Sarah could see the fire driving her forward. But moments before her fingers brushed over the screen, an unexpected anxiousness stopped her. What if Sarah didn't understand? What if this well-meaning friend, accustomed to Emma's previous conservatism, accused her of recklessness? Emma swallowed hard. She had felt different since the wolf incident, awakened to a drive to incite change. But could she articulate that shift to someone so close? In truth, this was a fundamental decision point for Emma. Would she dim her light to maintain the comfort of established relationships, or would she dare illuminate her path, inviting those who could accompany her? The answer was becoming clear. She could not become the mere echo of someone else's expectations. Taking the plunge, Emma sent the text, her finger lingering on the send button before it slipped away. The message read simply, "Can we talk soon? I need to share something important." As she watched the screen, waiting for Sarah's response, there was a shift within her. A resolute acceptance of the discomfort that often accompanied growth. Each pulse of her heartbeat echoed the reality she was crafting. She was a trailblazer, and that role came with isolating moments. The reply from Sarah came swiftly, tinged with concern but ultimately encouraging. "Of course I'm here. When do you want to meet?" Emma felt the tension in her shoulders relax slightly. They had a history of honest discussions, where doubts could be aired, and warmth always prevailed. But now, even as hope sparked, another fear began to take shape. What if Sarah openly questioned her drive at the meeting, in front of others? Emma's resolve hardened. She needed to prepare herself for any eventuality. In the fullness of that moment, Emma knew the confrontation was more than a simple exchange of ideas. It was a threshold to cross, a challenge to invite Sarah into her world thus far untouched by such fervor. It felt as if the moment had arrived to examine not just her friendship, but her fundamental beliefs about who she was becoming. Would she have the courage to stand her ground, even if it meant facing pushback from a valued friend? Tomorrow came with its own mysteries. Emma's resolve had deepened, but so had the weight of her determination. She knew one thing for sure. This conversation would frame the foundation of her new advocacy and her redrawn boundaries. And as she lay down to sleep, the moonlight casting shadows over her projects, one lingering thought filled her mind. How would she balance her passion for wildlife preservation with the expectations of those she loved? This question loomed large, and as sleep enveloped her, she drifted into a world where she could both save wolves and remain true to herself. Little did she know, her next encounter could either fortify her mission or threaten to unravel it entirely. The sun broke through the clouds the next day, illuminating evergreen pines with a quiet yet vibrant energy. Emma awakened with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety racing in her chest. Today was the day she would meet Sarah, a vital moment that could redefine her relationships and her advocacy. As she prepared herself, a flood of the previous day's experiences welled within her. The wolf she had saved, the community meeting where she had faced Jack's doubts and Sarah's concerns, it all hovered on the precipice of transformation. Emma glanced at the slides she had crafted, each one layered with her passion and conviction. But that passion came at a price. She could feel the tension in her stomach as she thought about the reactions her meeting and newfound conviction would elicit. The cafe where they had agreed to meet held an air of familiarity, its comforting aromas encapsulating moments shared between friends. As Emma stepped inside, she spotted Sarah sitting at their usual table. Her friend appeared deep in thought, fingers tracing circles around the rim of her coffee cup. With a shaky breath, Emma steeled herself and approached, ready to reveal the path she was forging. "Hey, Sarah," Emma greeted, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hey, I'm glad you're here," Sarah replied, her gaze kind but tinged with concern. "What's going on? You've been so busy lately, and I want to make sure you're okay." Emma focused on Sarah's intentions, her heart swelling with gratitude. They shared countless moments like this, where they could talk without pretenses. It felt like stepping onto solid ground as she began to share her experience of rescuing the wolf, the struggles she had confronted, and her desire to rally the community around wildlife conservation. She recounted her encounters and the promise she had made to protect, not just the wolf, but the land, and the delicate balance of their ecosystems. As she spoke, Emma could see the skepticism play across Sarah's face. A hint of confusion warred with concern as her friend listened intently. "Emma, I don't want you to think I'm dismissing this," Sarah interjected, her voice steady, yet firm. "But I've always known you as someone who plays it safe. Are you sure this is the direction you want to go?" That question hung heavily between them. It echoed the very battles Emma had fought within herself. But instead of retreating to doubt, she took a breath and met Sarah's gaze. This was a pivotal moment. "I realize now that playing it safe often meant stifling myself. I want to push boundaries, Sarah, for myself and for the community. We can't let tradition hold us back. There's a whole world out there, one filled with possibilities if we just open our eyes." The quiet tension lingered as Emma articulated her belief. She could see that Sarah was wrestling with her doubts, grappling with the vision Emma had laid out. "But what if people react poorly?" Sarah's voice trembled slightly. "They might not understand what you're trying to do." As much as Emma wanted to shield her friend from worry, she understood. This fear of judgment was a pervasive force in their lives, one that stunted the courage of entire communities. "I can't shrink back because of potential backlash," Emma responded. "What's the point of having a vision if I shy away from making it a reality? This is about nurturing an understanding that we need to coexist with nature, not fear it." The air crackled with their contrasting viewpoints. Emma quickly realized that their friendship was at the heart of this conflict. She yearned for Sarah's understanding, yet she understood how disorienting her newfound ambition must be for someone who knew her well. A glimmer of recognition sparked in Sarah's eyes, and Emma saw understanding emerge through her trepidation. "I want to support you, but it'll take some time for people to come around. Just be careful, okay?" Relief surged through Emma as she nodded. She could see the flickers of transformation beginning in Sarah as well. "Of course, I appreciate your honesty, and I promise I'll navigate this with caution." As they delved deeper into the conversation, Emma found herself inviting Sarah not just to support her coalition, but to actively participate. "You could help me plan the meeting," Emma suggested, her enthusiasm igniting. "With your perspective and understanding of the community, you can help shape the narrative. Together, we can create a space for dialogue, a chance for others to share their stories too." Sarah's eyes lit up. "You really believe we can make a difference?" "Yes," Emma asserted, feeling the conversation align with her purpose. "Imagine it, a community gathering where we listen and learn instead of judging and fearing. We can reshape the story together, one that embraces coexistence with wildlife rather than pushing it away." The possibility hung in the air, vibrant with energy. Sarah considered the proposition, her brow furrowing as she weighed the outcomes. Emma held her breath, desperate to share this journey with her friend. After a moment, she felt Sarah's conviction begin to stir. "Okay, let's do it. I want to help," Sarah finally said, her voice filled with resolve. A wave of elation surged through Emma, stronger than she could have anticipated. "Thank you. We can turn this into something meaningful." They spent the rest of the afternoon sketching plans, ideas for the meeting, potential outreach, and ways to engage those in the community who were skeptical. Emma's resolve grew as they brainstormed. She wasn't just an advocate anymore. She was a catalyst for change. As the sun dipped below the horizon, draping the town in twilight, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of achievement. She had taken the monumental step of confronting her fears and had transformed a potential struggle into an opportunity for collaboration. Together, step by rejuvenating step, they could reshape the narrative of Evergreen Pines, proving that growth was not only possible, but inevitable when one embraced their purpose. In that moment, Emma's heart felt resolute. She had not only reclaimed her own identity, but had found a partner in her journey, a friend who understood her fight. This was where she was meant to be, both as an advocate for the wildlife she loved and as an empowered individual capable of igniting change. As she prepared for the next stage of her journey, one question lingered, a mixture of excitement and caution. What more could she accomplish together with her community, now that she had begun to carve her own path? The answer awaited her at the intersection of ambition, understanding, and undeniable courage. Now was the time to turn this vision into a tangible reality. With her heart full of purpose, Emma stepped out into the evening air, ready to embrace the new adventures that awaited. Remember, if you found this chapter inspiring, you need to subscribe now to catch every exclusive emotional story that follows. Leave a like now to help the algorithm share it with even more people who need to see this transformational journey. Comment below with your thoughts on Sarah and Emma's conversation. How will their friendship evolve from here? And share instantly with at least 5 friends who could use a spark of motivation today. This is the moment to show your support and be part of a powerful narrative of change. Don't wait even one more second.